In a cozy little house on the edge of Seattle's suburbs, Lisa Harper sat at her cluttered desk, her laptop glowing with the latest design project she'd been tinkering with all morning. At 38, she'd carved out a life as a freelance graphic designer. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave her the freedom to be there for her 8-year-old son, Noah. The soft hum of winter wind slipped through the cracked window, and the faint sound of Noah's video game bleeps drifted in from the living room. It was one of those quiet Saturdays, the kind where you could smell the promise of snow in the air. Lisa stretched her arms, her dark hair falling loose from its messy bun, and glanced at the clock. 10:47 a.m. She was about to call Noah in for a snack when her phone buzzed on the desk. The name on the screen made her pause. Margaret Harper, her mom. Lisa's stomach tightened. She hadn't spoken to her mother in months, not since that awkward birthday call where Margaret had spent 10 minutes praising Lisa's older brother Brian and barely asked about her. 4 years had passed since they'd even seen each other in person. With a deep breath, she answered. "Lisa, it's me." Margaret's voice came through, crisp and clipped, like she was reading off a script. "I know it's been a while, but I'd like you and Noah to come for Thanksgiving this year. It's at our place, as usual, Thursday, 3 p.m. Don't be late. No how are you, no warmth. Just an invitation that sounded more like a summons." Lisa hesitated. Her relationship with her mom had always been a minefield. Margaret, 60 and sharp as ever, had spent her career managing a bank, her life a showcase of perfection. Pressed suits, spotless house, and a constant need to look better than everyone else. Lisa, with her freelance gigs and single mom chaos, had never fit that mold. Then there was her dad, Henry, 62, a retired engineer who'd rather tinker in his garage than argue with his wife's iron will. It was kind, sure, but spineless when it mattered. And of course there was Brian, 40, a hotshot doctor, Margaret's golden boy. He'd show up with his perfect wife, Sarah, and their 2 kids, Ethan and Mia, all polished and ready to bask in Margaret's approval. Lisa could already picture it, Brian bragging about his latest promotion while she sat there, the family misfit. But Noah deserved a chance to know his grandparents, didn't he? She rubbed her temple and said, "Okay, Mom, we'll be there." She hung up and walked into the living room, where Noah was sprawled on the rug, his small fingers mashing buttons on his controller. His sandy blonde hair stuck up in every direction, and those big hazel eyes, inherited from his dad, Tom, lit up when he saw her. "Hey, buddy," she said, plopping down beside him. "Guess what? We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's for Thanksgiving this year." Noah paused his game, tilting his head. "Really? Do they have a dog?" Lisa laughed. "No dog, but they've got a big house. Maybe we can bring something special. What do you think?" Noah's face broke into a grin. "Can we make an apple pie, like the one we did for my school party?" Lisa nodded, ruffling his hair. "You got it. We'll make the best apple pie they've ever tasted." She tried to match his excitement, but deep down a knot of unease twisted in her gut. Thanksgiving with her family wasn't just a meal. It was a test. Margaret had never hidden her disappointment in Lisa's choices. Dropping out of a real career path, marrying Tom, a scruffy musician she'd called a dead-end dreamer, and then raising Noah alone after their split. Tom was still in the picture, though. Sort of. They'd been separated for 3 years, not divorced. And he'd stuck around for Noah, popping in with his guitar and goofy stories whenever he wasn't gigging. As Noah chattered about pie crusts and cinnamon, Lisa's mind wandered. She wanted this to work. For Noah's sake, if nothing else, maybe this time Margaret would see her as more than the family screw-up. Maybe Henry would stand up for once. Maybe Brian wouldn't hog the spotlight. She shook her head, pushing the doubts away. Let's make it a good day, she whispered to herself, watching Noah's little hands wave in the air. But somewhere inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this Thanksgiving was going to be anything but simple. The next couple of days flew by in a blur of flour, sugar, and nervous energy. Lisa's small kitchen turned into a battlefield as she and Noah teamed up to make their apple pie. The counter was dusted white, and the air smelled like cinnamon and warm apples. A little pocket of calm before the storm Lisa knew was coming. Noah stood on a stool, carefully peeling apples with a kid-sized knife, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Mom, do you think Grandma will like this?" he asked, holding up a lopsided slice. Lisa smiled, brushing a streak of flour off his cheek. "She'd be crazy not to. You're a pie-making pro, kiddo." As they worked, Lisa's mind drifted back to the years she'd tried to forget. Growing up, she'd always been the odd one out. Margaret had pinned her hopes on Brian. Straight-A student, med school star, the son who'd checked every box. Lisa, though, she'd been the dreamer, doodling in notebooks when she was supposed to study for a real degree. When she'd picked graphic design over a corporate job, Margaret had called it a hobby, not a life. And when she'd married Tom, wild-haired, guitar-slinging Tom, her mom had nearly lost it. "He's going nowhere, Lisa," she'd said, her voice dripping with judgment. "You'll regret this." The marriage hadn't lasted, sure, but Lisa didn't regret Noah. Never Noah. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of the memory. It was Tom. "Hey, Lise." His voice crackled through, laid back as ever. "I've got a gig Wednesday night, but I'll swing by your mom's place after. Gotta see my little man on Thanksgiving, right?" Lisa glanced at Noah, who was now rolling out dough with way too much enthusiasm. "He'd love that," she said. "Just don't be too late, okay? It's already going to be a lot." Tom chuckled. "I'll do my best. Tell Noah I'm bringing him a new pick for that guitar he's been messing with." They hung up, and Lisa felt a flicker of relief. Tom wasn't perfect, but he showed up when it counted. Maybe having him there would soften the edges of whatever Margaret had in store. Later that night, after Noah was tucked in with his latest superhero comic, Lisa pulled out her sketchbook. Not for work, just to think. She doodled a little cartoon of their pie, golden and steaming, with Noah's stick figure smile beside it. She wanted this Thanksgiving to be different. 4 years ago, the last time she'd gone to her parents' place, Margaret had spent the whole night picking apart her life. "Brian's buying a second house, you know. What's your plan, Lisa?" Henry had just sat there, sipping his coffee, letting it happen. She'd left early that time, too, promising herself she wouldn't go back. But Noah was older now, curious about his family, and Lisa couldn't keep him from that forever. The morning before Thanksgiving, she dug through her closet for something to wear. She settled on a soft green dress, simple, comfortable, nothing Margaret could call sloppy. Noah bounded in, already in his favorite red sweater, the one with a tiny reindeer on it. "Do I look cool, Mom?" he asked, spinning around. "Coolest kid I know," she said, kneeling to fix his collar. "Let's grab that pie and the sketchbook you wanted to show Grandpa, okay?" Noah darted off to get his drawings, a collection of spaceships and dragons he'd been working on for weeks. "They're gonna love these," he said, his eyes shining. Lisa hoped he was right. As she packed the pie into a carrier, her phone lit up again. A text from Brian. "Hey sis, see you tomorrow. Mom's got the whole crew coming. Should be fun." Fun. Right. Brian always acted like their family was some Hallmark movie, probably because he never had to deal with the sharp end of Margaret's tongue. Lisa typed back a quick, "Yep, see you there," and shoved the phone in her pocket. She looked at Noah, who was hugging his sketchbook like it was a treasure chest. "We're gonna make this a good day, right?" she said, more to herself than to him. Noah nodded, oblivious to the weight in her voice. "The best day?" Lisa took a deep breath, the smell of apples still lingering in the air. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to walk into that house tomorrow and feel like she belonged, not like the black sheep, not like the failure. But as she turned off the kitchen lights, a shadow of doubt crept in. She'd been down this road before, and it never ended the way she hoped. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a gray sky and a bite in the air, the kind of chill that made Lisa pull her coat tighter as she loaded the car. The apple pie sat snug in its carrier on the passenger seat, Noah's sketchbook tucked under his arm as he climbed into the back. He was buzzing with excitement, chattering about how Grandpa might like his dragon drawings. Lisa forced a smile, her hands gripping the steering wheel a little too hard. The 40-minute drive to her parents' place in one of Seattle's swankier suburbs felt longer than it should have, every mile winding her nerves tighter. She kept glancing at Noah in the rearview mirror, his little red sweater a splash of color against the dreary day, and told herself this was for him. When they pulled up to the house, it was exactly as she remembered. A sprawling 2-story with perfect trim and a manicured lawn that screamed money. Margaret's old banker habits died hard. She'd always cared more about appearances than anything else. Lisa parked behind Brian's sleek SUV, took a steadying breath, and grabbed the pie. "Ready, buddy?" she asked Noah, who nodded and hopped out, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. They walked up the stone steps, and Lisa rang the bell, her heart thudding louder than the chime. Margaret opened the door, looking every bit the part in a tailored gray sweater and a string of pearls that probably cost more than Lisa's rent. Her silver hair was swept back, not a strand out of place. "Oh, Lisa," she said, her tone flat, like she'd just remembered they were coming. "You're earlier than I expected." No hug, no smile, just a quick glance at the pie before stepping aside. "Hey, Grandma," Noah piped up, bouncing on his toes. Margaret gave him a thin smile and a pat on the head, like he was a neighbor's kid she didn't quite know what to do with. "Come in," she said, already turning away. Inside, the house smelled like roasted turkey and expensive candles, the living room buzzing with voices. Brian was there, lounging on the couch in a crisp button-down, laughing with his wife Sarah, who looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Their kids, Ethan, 14, all lanky limbs and braces, and Mia, 10, with a smug little smirk, were sprawled out playing some card game. Henry shuffled over from the armchair, his gray hair a mess, and pulled Noah into a big, clumsy hug. "There's my guy," he said, his voice warm in a way Margaret's never was. "What do you bring me, huh?" Noah beamed and held up his sketchbook. "I drew dragons," Henry grinned. "Can't wait to see 'em." Lisa set the pie on the counter, catching Brian's eye. "Hey, sis," he called, flashing that easy grin of his. "Glad you made it." Sarah gave her a quick wave, then went back to chatting with an aunt Lisa barely recognized. The room was full, cousins, uncles, the usual holiday crowd, but Lisa already felt like she was on the outside looking in. Margaret breezed by, not even glancing at the pie, and launched into a story about Ethan's science fair win. "First place in the district," she bragged, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's got a real future ahead of him." Lisa bit her tongue, trying to join the small talk, but every time she opened her mouth, someone cut in or the conversation shifted. Noah tugged at her hand, whispering, "Can I show Ethan my drawings?" She nodded, watching him scamper off, only to see Ethan barely look up from his cards. By the time dinner rolled around, Lisa's nerves were frayed. The dining room was a sight. Long oak table decked out with candles, flowers, and a turkey Henry was proudly carving. Plates clinked as people started finding seats, and Lisa guided Noah toward the table, her eyes scanning for 2 empty spots. That's when Margaret stepped in, her voice sharp and casual at the same time. "Lisa, you and Noah can sit over there," she said, pointing to a flimsy folding table shoved in the corner between the kitchen and dining room. It was the kind of thing you'd see at a garage sale. Wobbly legs, scratched surface, 2 plastic chairs that looked like they'd collapse under a strong breeze. Lisa froze, her face burning. The main table was packed with Brian, Sarah, their kids, and the rest of the family, all laughing and passing dishes. "There's no room here," Margaret added, like it was obvious. Noah frowned, his small voice cutting through the hum. "Mom, why can't we sit with everyone?" Lisa's throat tightened. She forced a smile, kneeling to his level. "It's okay, buddy. We'll be fine over there." But it wasn't okay. She led him to the little table, her hands shaking as she pulled out a chair. The food came out, steaming turkey, gravy, stuffing, all piled high on the main table. For them, a runner dropped off 2 plates, a sad lump of cold mashed potatoes and a handful of limp green beans. No turkey, no gravy, nothing warm. Noah poked at his plate, his excitement fading. "Is this it?" he asked, looking up at her with those big hazel eyes. Lisa couldn't answer. She just stared at the cold mess, her chest tightening with a mix of shame and fury. Across the room, Margaret laughed at something Brian said, her voice carrying like a slap. Henry glanced their way, his face uneasy, but he didn't move. Brian caught Lisa's eye and shrugged like it was no big deal. Sarah didn't even look up. Noah set his fork down, his shoulders slumping, and Lisa felt something snap inside her. This wasn't just about a seat or a plate. It was every slight, every jab, every time her mom had made her feel like she didn't belong. And now Noah was feeling it too. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. She couldn't let this slide. Not anymore. The clatter of forks and chatter from the main table felt like it was a world away, even though Lisa could still see her mom's perfectly poised figure from the corner of her eye. She sat there at that rickety folding table, staring at the cold mashed potatoes congealing on her plate, the green beans looking like they'd been forgotten in the pot for hours. Noah's small hand hovered over his fork, then dropped to his lap. His little face, usually so bright, was clouded with confusion and hurt. "Mom," he whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "did we do something wrong?" That question hit Lisa like a punch to the gut. She looked at him, his red sweater wrinkled now, his hazel eyes searching hers, and something inside her broke wide open. She'd spent years swallowing her mom's barbs, brushing off the comparisons to Brian, pretending it didn't sting when Margaret acted like she and Noah were second class. But this, seeing her boy hunched over a plate of leftovers while Ethan and Mia giggled over gravy-soaked turkey, it was too much. Lisa's hands clenched into fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, a mix of rage and heartbreak she couldn't shove down anymore. "Nobody," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong." She pushed her chair back, the scrape of plastic on tile loud enough to make a few heads turn. Noah looked up, startled, as she stood and took his hand. "Come on, Noah," she said, louder now, loud enough that the room started to quiet. "We're leaving." Her words hung in the air, sharp and final. Margaret froze mid-sentence, a piece of turkey still on her fork. Brian's eyebrows shot up, and Sarah's mouth opened like she was about to say something but thought better of it. Henry set his carving knife down, his face paling. Lisa didn't wait for their reactions to settle. She grabbed their coats from the rack by the door, her movements quick and deliberate. But Noah tugged her hand, stopping her. "Wait, Mom," he said, his voice small but steady. He let go and darted back to the dining room, straight to Margaret. Lisa watched, her breath catching, as he pulled a folded piece of paper from his sketchbook, a drawing he'd kept tucked away. He held it out to his grandmother, his chin lifted like he was braver than he felt. "Grandma," he said, clear enough for everyone to hear, "why don't you like Mom? She's sad a lot, and I don't get it. I'm gonna take care of her, though." Margaret's hand hesitated as she took the paper, her lips parting but no sound coming out. Lisa stepped closer, peering over Noah's shoulder. It was a sketch of her, smiling, surrounded by stars, and Noah standing beside her holding her hand. Underneath, in his messy kid handwriting, it said, "Mom's the best. Why don't you see it?" The room went dead silent. Margaret's face flushed, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the drawing completely. Brian coughed, shifting in his seat. "Lisa, come on," he said, his tone halfway between a plea and a scold. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Sarah nodded faintly, but she wouldn't meet Lisa's eyes. Henry cleared his throat, his voice rough. "Margaret, he's right. This isn't fair. You've gone too far." It was the first time Lisa could remember her dad pushing back, and it almost threw her off balance. Almost. But she was done waiting for someone else to fix this. "Noah, let's go," she said, her voice steady now, cutting through the thick air. She took his hand again, and he followed her, clutching his sketchbook to his chest. Margaret finally found her words, snapping. "Lisa, you're being dramatic as usual. Sit down and eat. You should be grateful we even—" Lisa spun around, her eyes blazing. "Grateful for what, Mom? For cold potatoes and a corner table? For you treating my son like he does?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. "We're done here." She marched to the door, Noah right beside her, and yanked it open. The cold November air hit her like a slap, but it felt good, clean, free. She heard Margaret mutter something about always overreacting, but it was drowned out by the sound of the door slamming shut behind them. Noah's hand squeezed hers as they walked to the car, his breath puffing out in little clouds. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, looking up at her with those big eyes. Lisa knelt down, pulling him into a tight hug. "I'm okay, buddy. We're okay." "I'm sorry you had to see that." He hugged her back, his arms surprisingly strong for an 8-year-old. "It's not your fault," he said, echoing her own words from earlier. "Grandma was being mean." Lisa let out a shaky laugh, tears stinging her eyes. "Yeah, she was, but you were so brave back there. That drawing. You're my hero, you know that?" Noah grinned, a little of his spark coming back. "Can we get food somewhere else? I'm still hungry." Lisa stood, brushing off her knees. "You bet. Let's find something warm and good, just for us." As she buckled him into the car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, starting the engine instead. Whatever it was, Margaret's excuses, Brian's lectures, it could wait. Right now, it was just her and Noah driving away from that house and all its weight. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in years, she felt like she'd taken something back. And that was enough. The car hummed along the quiet streets, the glow of Seattle's suburbs fading into the rearview mirror as Lisa drove. Noah sat in the back, fiddling with his sketchbook, the tension from her parents' house still lingering like a bad taste. She'd turned her phone to silent, but it buzzed again in her pocket. probably Margaret or Brian, ready with some half-baked apology or guilt trip. She wasn't in the mood. "How about Sunny Hill?" she asked Noah, glancing at him through the mirror. "They've got turkey and pie, and I bet it's 1,000,000 times better than what we left behind." Noah perked up, nodding. "Can I get whipped cream on mine?" Lisa smiled, the knot in her chest loosening just a bit. "All the whipped cream you want, buddy." They pulled into the lot at Sunny Hill, a little diner with neon lights and a vibe that felt like a warm hug compared to the sterile chill of Margaret's mansion. Inside, the place was buzzing. Families, loners, a few stragglers who didn't have a table to go to on Thanksgiving. Lisa and Noah slid into a booth by the window, and she ordered them a turkey plate to share, plus 2 slices of pie. Noah dug in the second the food hit the table, his mood lifting with every bite. Lisa picked at hers, her mind still replaying that scene at the house. Margaret's smug shrug, Henry's late backbone, Noah's little drawing shaking the room. She was proud of him, proud of herself, but the hurt still gnawed at her. Her phone buzzed again, this time lighting up with a text from Tom. "Just got to your mom's place. What's going on? Nobody's talking and it's weird as hell." Lisa's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Tom was there? She typed back, quick. "We left, long story, at Sunny Hill with Noah now." She hit send, then set the phone down, figuring he'd call later. But 5 minutes later, as Noah was smearing whipped cream on his nose and giggling, the diner door swung open and there was Tom. Tall, scruffy, still in his gig clothes with a guitar case slung over his shoulder. Noah spotted him first, shouting, "Dad!" and scrambling out of the booth to hug him. Lisa stood, surprised but not shocked. Tom had a knack for showing up when she least expected it. "What are you doing here?" she asked as he slid into the booth across from her, Noah climbing in beside him. Tom ran a hand through his messy hair, his brow furrowed. "I got to your mom's place and it was like walking into a funeral. Your dad was pacing, Brian was whispering with Sarah, and Margaret, she tried to corner me the second I walked in, said she'd called me over to talk some sense into you about being a family again, like I'm her errand boy or something." Lisa's jaw tightened. That was the twist. Margaret hadn't just let them go. She'd pulled Tom into her game, thinking he'd drag Lisa back into line. "What did you say?" she asked, leaning forward. Tom's eyes met hers, steady and serious, none of his usual laid-back charm. "I told her she's got no right to judge you. Said you're a damn good mom and Noah's the best kid I know, and if she can't see that, it's her loss. Then your dad, he just up and walked out with me. Said he's done letting her run the show. He's outside, actually. Wanted to give us a minute first." Lisa blinked, her breath catching. Henry had left. She glanced out the window and saw her dad's old pickup parked crookedly across 2 spaces, his silhouette slumped in the driver's seat. Before she could process it, Noah piped up. "Grandpa's here too?" Tom nodded, ruffling his hair. "Yeah, bud, he's pretty upset about what happened." Lisa sat back, her mind spinning. Margaret had tried to use Tom as a weapon, but instead he'd turned it around. And Henry, quiet old Henry, had finally picked a side. She looked at Tom, then at Noah, who was grinning ear to ear with whipped cream still on his face. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Tom shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I did. You two are my people. Always have been." The diner door creaked again, and Henry stepped in, his coat rumpled and his face drawn. He spotted them and shuffled over, hands in his pockets. "Lisa," he started, his voice low. "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her years ago. That table, the food, it's not right." Lisa swallowed hard, the anger she'd carried for him softening just a little. "Yeah, Dad," she said. It wasn't. He nodded, looking at Noah. You're a good kid. Braver than me. Noah smiled, shy but proud. And for a moment, sitting there with Tom, Noah, and even Henry, Lissa felt something shift. Like maybe they'd all just rewritten the rules. The fluorescent lights of Sunny Hill buzzed softly overhead as Lisa leaned back in the booth, watching Noah chatter away to Tom and Henry. The turkey was long gone and the pie plates sat empty, streaked with whipped cream Noah had insisted on licking clean. Her dad sat across from her, nursing a coffee, his hands wrapped around the mug like it was an anchor. He'd apologized again after sitting down, his voice cracking as he admitted how much he'd let Margaret's control shape their family. I didn't see it till that drawing, he said, glancing at Noah. You've got a good heart, kid. Noah grinned, snuggling closer to Tom, who'd pulled out a guitar pick from his pocket as a little Thanksgiving gift. Lisa's phone had stopped buzzing. Maybe Margaret had given up, or maybe she was too busy saving face with Brian and the others. Either way, Lisa didn't care. This, right here, Tom's quiet presence, Noah's laughter, Henry's shaky attempt at making things right, was more family than she'd felt in years. She looked out the window at the first flakes of snow drifting down, dusting the parking lot, and felt a weight lift. We're okay, she said, half to herself, half to them. Tom caught her eye and nodded, like he got it without her saying more. A year later, Thanksgiving looked different. Lisa's little house was alive with noise. Pots clanging, voices overlapping. Tom was in the kitchen, wrestling with a turkey he'd swore he could cook, while Noah set the table, debating blue versus white tablecloths with a seriousness that made Lisa laugh. Henry showed up early, a bottle of wine in one hand and a shy smile on his face. He'd changed since that night, left Margaret for a while, then went back on his own terms, pushing for something closer to equal ground. Margaret arrived last, hesitant, a knitted scarf for Noah in her hands. I made it myself, she said, her voice softer than Lisa had ever heard. Noah hugged her without a second thought, and for the first time Margaret hugged him back. They all sat at one table. Warm mashed potatoes for everyone, no corners, no leftovers. Noah said thanks, his small voice steady. I'm glad we're together. Lisa squeezed Tom's hand under the table. Her real family right there, scars and all, healing one bite at a time.